Welcome to the first in a series of Endoxa Learning RE lessons. These lessons will teach some of the core GCSE and A-level RS arguments in a visual manner, which will hopefully be much more interesting than reading them from the textbook. For today's lesson, we will be looking at the A-level argument that conscience is linked to reason. It will explore Aquinas' understanding of conscience and how its possibility for error suggests it is a product of human reason rather than the voice of God. This argument will also be shown through an analysis of the conscience's ability to respond to specific circumstances. So let's get started. Firstly, this argument step is going to highlight the significance of conscience as it sets us apart from other animals. Here we can see that unlike humans, animals do not have a conscience. This is clearly indicated by the red box around the statement indicating falsity. This means we can deduce that conscience depends on something unique to humans. We can support this argument further by adding a supporting statement, as you can see on the left-hand side. This being that unlike humans, animals have no understanding of morality. This increases the strength of the argument as indicated on the argument strength bar, which is this purple bar in the middle here. Now let's build this argument even further. If we argue that humans' special relationship with God and ability to reason are what makes humans unique, we can conclude that our conscience is either the voice of God or the voice of reason. We can come to this conclusion using the knowledge by clicking this knowledge box. We can argue that Christians believe humans are distinguished from animals because they are made in the image of God. Aquinas also holds that humans are set apart from animals due to our ability to reason. You can pause this video at any time to read any of the knowledge boxes further, as they are quite long. Now let's have a look at how people behave and how this is related to conscience. Firstly, sometimes following our conscience can lead to bad results, and as we all know, under the same circumstances, people's consciences direct them to different actions. From these two ideas at the top, we can conclude that our conscience is fallible. This means that it can be wrong or sometimes make mistakes. Now, if we bring these two parts of the argument together, that conscience is fallible and that conscience is either the voice of God or of our reason, we can argue that either God or reason produces our fallible conscience. This can be supported by the thoughts of John Henry Newman, who believed that conscience is the voice of God inside of us, the aboriginal vicar of Christ. In this argument step, we will be using the attributes of God to argue that conscience is not produced by God. As you can see here, the statement is in red, indicating it as false, indicating that God cannot be fallible, as God is perfection. You can learn more about this by clicking on the brain icon. This means that conscience cannot be the voice of God, and in turn must mean that reason produces our fallible conscience. So now let's develop an argument in parallel to strengthen the main argument strand we've just discussed. Let's look at the challenges that face human decision making. If we click on the brain icon, we can find out more interesting knowledge about the first statement, being that humans always have sufficient knowledge to properly inform our reason, and as you can see, this statement we are arguing is false. Here we can see that Aquinas distinguishes between vincible ignorance, which is ignorance that could have been avoided, and invincible ignorance, which is ignorance that a person cannot avoid. In such cases, an action does not carry any moral blame. From this, we can argue that reason can depend on insufficient knowledge. If things based on insufficient knowledge are unreliable, we can then come to the conclusion that reason can also be unreliable, as you can see here at the bottom of this argument step. We can use this conclusion, that reason can be unreliable, to support the argument step we discussed earlier, as you can see by this little supporting arrow here. This has increased the strength of the argument, as you can see by the purple argument strength bar as discussed before. Using support and evidence in your essays and exams can really help you increase your marks. From here, we can come to our argument conclusion that conscience is linked to reason. Now, to further strengthen this argument, we are going to introduce another supporting argument. This supporting argument is based around Aquinas' understanding of the nature of conscience. Let us learn a bit more about this by clicking on the I here for the scenario box. Aquinas believed that conscience is comprised of synderesis and consenter. Synderesis is an inner principle that motivates all people to do good and avoid evil. It is part of God's good will for humans. Conscienter, by contrast, is the process of forming particular moral judgments relating to specific situations. These processes can lead to errors because we may have insufficient information about the situation, or our reason may be impaired by a variety of factors. From this knowledge, we can conclude that we all try to act well in all situations, and if we want to act well, then we must apply our reason to apply general principles to specific situations, and therefore meaning that we must use reason to act. Conscience describes deciding how to act. You can see the exact meaning of conscience on the right hand side. Feel free to pause the video to find a bit more out about this. Therefore, using our previous step, we must use reason in deciding how to act. We can introduce that we use reason in acts of conscience. From this, we can come to our argument conclusion once again that conscience is linked to reason. Brilliant work! That's the end of the lesson. We have successfully come to the conclusion that conscience is linked to reason right at the bottom down here. Here you can see the full argument graph behind this lesson that we've just been working through. You can use this as a visual essay plan or as a revision tool. To see more of our visual RE lessons, head over to Endoxa Learning's blog page, and to try out interactive software at home or in class, contact us today to start your subscription.